Hello everyone, I hope you're having a good time. My name is Paul Bunyan, and I'm going to keep my promise and teach you about the races of D&D. I'll only be going over the ones that can be found in the player's handbook, because unlike the elves, I occasionally need to sleep. I'll be chatting about them, and I'll talk a little bit about what I like and what I don't like, and what classes I think their abilities might lend themselves to. Despite my galaxy brain analysis, this is just my opinion, and be sure to leave your own favorite class-race pairings in the comments below. We'll start off with the Dwarves. Dwarves are short and stout mountain folk, and when they get all steamed up, they don't shout, they hold a grudge for centuries until they find the one that they have a grudge on and end their life subscription with a battle axe. These grudge holders stand between 4 and 5 feet tall, live for about 300 years, and are expert miners and craftsmen. If you pick a dwarf, you get a +2 to Constitution, you get dark vision, up to 60 feet, proficiency with axes and hammers, resistance to being poisoned, proficiency with bluer supplies, stonemason's tools, or blacksmith's tools. You become really knowledgeable about where rocks come from, and you get to speak Dwarvish. In addition, you get your choice of 2 sub-races that give you even more goodies. Hill Dwarves are a favorite of mine because they get a +1 to Wisdom and 1 additional hit point every time you level up. Mountain Dwarves get a +2 to Strength and gain proficiency with light and medium armor. While the Mountain Dwarf proficiency in armor isn't really that impressive to me, everything else for all dwarves is really good and will go well with pretty much any class. These guys are some of my favorite race because I'm a sucker for the old grumpy, grumbling stereotype, and if you hold grudges for longer than is healthy, the dwarf is the race for you. Moving on to everyone's favorite Mary Sue's, the Elves. These guys get a lot right off the bat. They stand between 5 and 6 feet tall, can live for 700 years, get a +2 to Dexterity, have dark vision, proficiency in perception, advantage against being charmed, they can't be put to sleep, and they speak Elvish. You also get a special ability called Trance, which basically gives you all the benefits of sleeping without the downsides of being asleep. On top of all this, the PHB gives you 3 elf sub-races. High Elves get a +1 to Intelligence, proficiency with swords and bows, and an extra language, and 1 cantrip from the wizard spell list. Wood Elves get a +1 to Wisdom, proficiency with swords and bows, an increase in movement speed. They can hide in lightly obscured areas as long as that area is obscured with something nature-themed, like some leaves or some fog. Finally, the Dark Elves, the Drow. They get proficiency with crossbows, rapiers, and short swords. They get a +1 to Charisma, Dark Vision up to 120 feet, and Drow Magic, which lets them cast the spells Fairy Fire, Dancing Lights, and Darkness. All this is really good, but it comes at a cost. Sunlight sensitivity. Drow really hate the sun, and while it doesn't kill them like a vampire, it effectively blinds you, giving you disadvantage on perception checks and attack rolls when you or your target are in bright sunlight. The Elves have a lot going for them, and their optimal class choice depends on your subrace. I tend to make my Wood Elves either Druids or Clerics, High Elves make for good Wizards, and Drow are great Rogues, Sorcerers, and Bards. If you want to feel like a truly magical race, pick an elf. You won't be disappointed. Moving on to the legally distinct Halflings. These guys are the little people of the world with big dreams and big bonuses. They stand about 3 feet tall, can live over 100 years, and like the Dwarf, have a walking speed of 25 feet. They get a +2 to Dex, can move through spaces occupied by creatures larger than they are, they can speak Halfling, and have advantage against being frightened. They have 2 subraces, the Lightfoot and the Stout. Lightfoots get a +1 to Charisma and can hide behind larger creatures as if they were fully obscured. Stouts get a +1 to Constitution and share in the Dwarf's poison resistance. Ultimately, the best draw of the Halfling is their Lucky ability. Halflings are innately lucky and get to reroll 1s on a d20 for any ability check or saving throw with practically no limit. If you feel like the best things come in small packages, the Halfling is the race for you. Now we come to the humans. Standing under 5 to over 6 feet tall and living just under a century, humans are often made fun of for being, well, boring. A lot of them stems from their racial benefits. Humans have no subraces to choose from, only a variant that you can swap out for the basic one. The standard human comes with 1 additional language, a walking speed of 30 feet, a +1 to all their ability scores. That's it. Now, a +1 to everything might seem cool, but I don't need those bonuses in my dump stats. For this reason, I recommend the Variant Human. The Variant Human gives you a +1 to 2 ability scores, proficiency with any 1 skill of your choice, and a feat. This is a whole lot more useful than a simple +1 to everything, and it makes humans feel more adaptable. However, I do still feel like something is missing out of my fantasy human lunchbox. However, they can still go well with any class. If you feel like you don't need pointy ears or innate magic powers to go dragon slaying, then shack up with a human. Now it's time for the Dragonborn. No, not that one, this one. The Dragonborn have gotten just as much grief over the lifespan of 5th edition, not because they were bland, but for the longest time they were severely miffed in terms of racial abilities. This has more or less been fixed with the release of Fizban's Treasury of Dragons. However, the base Dragonborn in the PHB stands over 6 feet tall, has a movement speed of 30 feet, lives for about 80 years, and get a +2 to strength, a +1 to con, and can speak Draconic. The main draw of any Dragonborn is their Draconic ancestry. Basically, you pick a dragon, like red, gold, silver, or blue, you make your Dragonborn that color, and your Dragonborn gets 2 things out of the deal. The first is a breath weapon that mimics that of your chosen dragon cousin. The second is resistance to that same element. For example, if you pick a red Dragonborn, you get to breathe fire, and you have resistance to fire damage. Fizban's Treasury of Dragons expanded on this, giving you more benefits depending on if you choose a chromatic, metallic, or gem dragon, and I'll go over that later in another video. All in all, Dragonborn lend themselves more towards martial classes from what I get. I tend to make mine either fighters or barbarians. If you can't wait for the 300th release of Skyrim, then try out the Dragonborn. Now we find an odd little race next, the Gnome. These plucky little fey folk stand between 3 and 4 feet tall, live up to 500 years, and are one of the rarest races I've seen in terms of people playing them. The standard gnome gets a +2 to intelligence, 25 walking speed, dark vision, the gnomish language, and have advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saving throws against magical effects. Aside from this, gnomes get 2 subraces. Rock gnomes are extra crunchy with a +1 to constitution, they get advantage on history checks for magical items, proficiency with tinkerer's tools, and they can use these tinkerer's tools to make clockwork doodads, like a clock or a music box. Forest gnomes get a +1 to dex, the ability to talk with small animals, and the minor illusion cantrip. Gnomes, to me, feel like a mix of a halfling and an elf, and they're very good at being little tricksy fellas that are great out of combat, more so than in combat from what I'm seeing. If you want your DM to look you dead in the eye and say you've been gnomed, the gnome is the race for you. Half-elves are up next, and they get the best traits of humans and elves. They're about as large as humans, have a 30-foot walking speed, and live for around 200 years. They get a +2 to charisma and a +1 to 1 ability score of your choice. They have dark vision, get proficiency in 2 skills, they can speak Elvish, and have that thing elves have where they can't be put to sleep. Oh, and they have advantage against being charmed, too. These guys are so much fun to roleplay, and they make incredible bards. If you want the best of both worlds, try out the half-elves. On the opposite end of the spectrum, you have half-orcs. These guys are humanoids with orcish ancestry mixed in there somewhere. They stand as tall as humans, but beefier, only live around 75, and have a 30-foot movement speed. They get dark vision, the orcish language, a +2 to strength, a +1 to con, proficiency in intimidation, the ability to deal more damage on critical hits, and the ability to just say nope when they're about to die. This class is obviously 100% grade A barbarian material. However, I find they make really good fighters, paladins, and even monks as well. If you like Googling pictures of muscular women, the half-orc is right for you. Okay. Last one, we can do this. The Tieflings. Tieflings are those humans who have infernal blood running through their veins. They are the same size as humans, but come in all kinds of colors, from white to red to blue. They have tails and long horns like a goat or ram coming out of their head. They are humans with a splash of devilish flair to them. As for the ability, they get a +2 to charisma, a +1 to intelligence, movement speed of 30 feet, dark vision, the ability to speak infernal, resistance to fire damage, and innate magic that lets them cast thaumaturgy, hellish rebuke, and darkness. Tieflings have a lot going for them. I didn't mention any of their subraces because the PHB doesn't have their subraces, but throughout all the other books, they have more subraces than the Elves. And remember that thing I said about needing to sleep sometimes? I tend to make my Tieflings into warlocks, sorcerers, or bards. If you remember when the devil went down to Georgia, the Tiefling is the race for you. And that's it. Thank you all so much for your patience in this longer video, and I hope I'm getting you guys excited to start making your own characters. I'll be doing videos on the classes next, each one getting their own video for the sake of my sanity. Until then, good luck on your quest, and thanks again for watching.